Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're diving into the fascinating world of Roosevelt one-dime coins. Small coins that many people overlook every single day. But don't let their size fool you. Some Roosevelt silver dimes are worth big money today, and a few rare examples have shocked collectors across America. Hidden among ordinary pocket change are ultra-rare U.S. dimes, valuable mint errors, and historic silver issues that coin collectors and investors are actively searching for. In this video, we explore the top 5 most valuable, expensive, and ultra-rare Roosevelt dime coins. You'll discover rare PD and S-mint mark dimes, 90% silver Roosevelt dimes with unique color tones, coins found in dirty or circulated condition worth serious money, why a tiny 10-cent coin could be worth thousands or even millions of dollars. So before you spend that old dime or toss it aside as spare change, stick around, because you might be holding a hidden fortune in your hands. Let's get started. First up, one. If you ever hold a 1976 D. Roosevelt dime in your hand, you're holding something deeper than metal and stamped dates. You are holding a piece of time, a fragment of American daily life that quietly crossed through decades of change, conflict, culture shifts, and personal moments most people never pause to remember. The dime itself is small, unassuming, easily overlooked, yet carries a weight that only time could build upon. This is not just a coin. It is a witness, a silent observer of history, and for those who understand what to look for, it is a vessel of possibility. The year 1976 in the United States was a year of celebration and reflection. It was a bicentennial, 200 years since the nation declared independence. Everywhere people looked, there were flags, parades, fireworks, and commemorations. The spirit of the bicentennial infused the culture with a sense of history meeting the present. And while the official state celebrations grabbed headlines and national attention, everyday objects, including coins, were quietly part of that celebration too. People used coins without thinking of them as historical artifacts, but in that very normalcy lies the extraordinary. A Roosevelt dime from 1976 struck at the Denver Mint, marked with a simple, unobtrusive D, went into circulation with no fanfare. To the average person, it was just change used for parking meters, vending machines, phone booths, and loose change jars. But decade after decade, those same coins passed through thousands of hands, pocket to wallet to register and back, witnessing a world in motion. The 1976 D-dime was present in moments big and small, paycheck to purchase, school lunch to subway fare, jukebox credit to newspaper purchase. Every life it touched added a layer of human experience to its surface. Coins are strange survivors. They live in a physical world that we take for granted. Wallets, purses, ashtrays, couch cushions, pockets, and drawers. Yet they outlive the people who use them. A coin that people ignored in 1976 may today be a prized artifact, not because of precious metals or rarity, but because of the silent historical life it lived. The Roosevelt dime was not minted in silver after 1964, yet its meaning does not come from metal alone. Meaning comes from the story of survival. How many were made, how many survive in original condition, and how many were forgotten until rediscovery. Dirty condition dimes, those at Showtime's imprint, often hold the most meaning. People assume that coins must be shiny to have value, but serious collectors know better. Dirt, toning, oxidation, uneven surfaces, and will tell a coin's life story in a way polished aluminum cannot replicate. Every darkened patch or flattened rim is a chapter in a coin's biography, evidence of decades of everyday use, environmental interaction, and human handling. In numismatics, this natural age, the untouched surface that has never been scrubbed or polished, is more valuable than a coin artificially made to look new. To understand the 1976 D-dime, you have to look beyond face value. In 1976, a dime could buy sweets, stamps, or contribute to a savings jar. The average American did not save dimes for posterity. They spent them, often without a moment's thought. That mundane spending pattern means that the survivors today, coins that remain in excellent original condition, are far fewer than mint numbers might suggest. Survival itself becomes scarcity. Mint marks like the D from the Denver Mint offer more than geographic information. They anchor the coin to the industrial heart of American coin production during that era. The Denver Mint was a workhorse facility, producing millions of coins each year to satisfy everyday demand. It was not a hub for special issues or collector variants. It was practical, efficient, and focused on servicing the economy. But that very efficiency is part of what makes certain coins from Denver fascinating in hindsight. They were meant to be ordinary, but many became extraordinary by virtue of how few survived unaltered. The Roosevelt dime carries a likeness of Franklin D. Roosevelt, a president whose legacy is deeply etched into American memory. His leadership through the Great Depression and World War II shaped a generation. To carry his portrait in your pocket was to carry a reflection of resilience, endurance, and national identity. The dime links everyday life with a deeper historical narrative, and that link becomes vivid only in hindsight, when the relentless pace of history slows enough for us to appreciate the objects that witnessed it. Collectors often talk about original surfaces in untouched condition, and these terms matter because they speak to authenticity. A coin that is acquired where naturally, without human intervention, preserves information. That information is not always visually glamorous, but it is scientifically and historically meaningful. A naturally worn 1976 D dime might have tiny scratches from decades in a pocket, microscopic dents from tipping over a table edge, and subtle toning from chemical reactions with the environment. These changes are not defects. They are evidence of existence. Stories of coins that make someone rich overnight are rare and usually tied to specific anomalies, mint errors, limited production runs, or dramatic historical context. The 1976 D dime does not have the classic rare error backing its potential value. What gives it power, however, is its place in time and how it has lived in the years since it was minted. People are fascinated by age, continuity, and survival. A coin that has survived 50 years of circulation, storage, neglect, or collection witnessed thousands of unnoticed moments that shape its character. When you handle an old Roosevelt dime, you are holding a material record of lived moments. It passed through hands that bought groceries, tipped waitstaff, used payphones, and saved it in jars just in case. Some coins were lost in lawns, others folded into letters, others forgotten at the bottom of drawers. Each one has a unique journey, and that uniqueness is what a collector values. In the mid-1970s, American currency still felt tangible. Paper bills and coins were handled daily, counted by hand, and felt physically as value. There were no contactless transactions, no digital wallets, no credit cards everywhere. For the people who walked the streets in 1976, money was tactile. You held it, you felt it, you watched it pass through your fingers. The Roosevelt dime was part of that tactile economy. It lived life, not just existence. Dirty condition coins often evoke strong reactions from collectors. To the casual observer, a worn coin may seem unattractive, scratched, darkened, dull. But to someone who understands history, these marks are compelling. They are proof of interaction. Polishing destroys these historical markings, and once lost, they can never be recovered. That is why cleaning a coin is often discouraged. It erases the very history that makes a coin meaningful. Collectors who study coins understand that value is a complex mix of variables. It is not only age or metal or mint mark. It is historical context, survival rate, condition, eye appeal, and narrative. A coin that perfectly balances these factors can move from mere pocket change to an object of fascination. The 1976 D. Roosevelt dime may not fetch the astronomical prices of ancient rarities, but in the right condition and with the right story, it becomes far more than 5 cents. Another layer of fascination comes from next up. If you hold a 1975 Roosevelt dime in your hand right now, you are holding something far more fascinating than spare change. You are holding a quiet piece of American history that has passed through countless lives, crossed millions of moments, and survived the ordinary churn of everyday life to become a witness to time itself. This unassuming coin, struck without fanfare and circulated without applause, quietly threaded itself into tens of millions of transactions, and over decades it absorbed the rhythms of daily life. Payphones, jukeboxes, bus rides, vending machines, lunch counters, grocery stores, and the tiny moments of millions of familiar people who never thought twice about the coin in their pocket. In 1975, America was dancing between the past and the future. The Vietnam War had recently ended, Watergate had shaken trust in institutions, and cultural change was sweeping the country like an unseen wind. The economy was fragile. People carried cash more than cards, and coins still mattered. In that world, a dime was not just 5 cents. It was part of how life flowed, how people bought necessities, and how they felt the weight of value in their hands. The Roosevelt dime was more than metal. It was experience. The Roosevelt dime had been minted since 1946, but by the mid-1970s, its iconic design, Franklin D. Roosevelt's calm, resolute profile on the obverse, and the torch flanked by oak and laurel on the reverse, had become so familiar that most people barely noticed it anymore. They saw it every day, just another coin. But everything familiar has a hidden depth, because familiarity breeds use, and use writes history into metal in ways no polished record ever could. Dirty conditioned dimes, those that look dull, darkened, tarnished, or worn, are some of the most profound history keepers. What many people call dirty is actually evidence of life. Original surfaces that have aged naturally are like pages of a diary written in fingerprints, tiny scratches, toning, and microscopic wear. Every imperfection is not damage. It is testimony. What a coin has been, how long it was used, and how it survived the passage of time. In numismatics, a clean coin is often considered less valuable than a naturally aged one, because cleaning removes the very clues that tell the coin story. A polished surface looks attractive, but it erases decades of subtle history. A naturally aged dime, darkened by decades of oxygen interaction, pocket acidity, and circulation wear, reveals its journey, not just how it was made, but how it lived. These marks are the fingerprints of time. The year 1975 itself sits quietly in history. It was not a year of dramatic coinage shifts, precious metal changes, or mint errors that made headlines. It was a year of everyday life, which, when viewed decades later, becomes extraordinary precisely because it represents the unnoticed continuities of human experience. Coins minted in years of upheaval become symbols of survival. Coins minted in years of quiet life become relics of a time when people simply lived without realizing history was being pressed into their hands. Every dime from this era carries echoes of a world before digital wallets, before prepaid cards, before contactless payment systems. In 1975, people handled money physically. They counted change, dropped coins into jars for savings, tipped waitstaff with exact change, and felt the cool weight of metal against their fingertips. The dime was part of that world, an uncelebrated companion to every small purchase, every bus ride, every lottery ticket, every meter-feeding parking machines. A dime is small, but it travels far. It can start the day in a wallet tucked into a back pocket, then end up in couch cushions at night. It can be dropped, lost, found, carried, forgotten, rediscovered, placed in a jar, gifted to a child, or left in a drawer for decades. These varied pathways create the diversity you see today in surviving 1975 Roosevelt dimes. Some look bright and freshly struck. Others are worn, dark, and deeply personal, relics of everyday action. The Roosevelt dime design carries symbolism too. Franklin Roosevelt, who appears on the coin, was a leader in a different time, a time of global depression and war. His face on the dime was meant to honor his legacy, his leadership, and his connection to public life. But by 1975, his image had become so familiar that most people barely registered it. That familiarity, however, becomes dose of collective memory over time. Seeing Roosevelt's face dozens of times a day embeds him not just in wallets, but in the collective unconscious of a generation. Collectors do not chase shiny surfaces. They chase stories. A coin without a story is metal. A coin with a history is a fragment of lived experience. For many decades, these dimes entered pockets and registers without intention of preservation. Only decades later do people pull them out of jars, envelopes, albums, and drawers and realize they have something that survived long after its moment of everyday use had passed. When people hear stories about coins becoming worth vast sums, they often think only of rare errors or precious metal content. A 1975 Roosevelt dime is not a silver coin, and it was not struck in a year of famous mint errors. Yet rarity and value are not only about tabulated mint numbers and catalog mistakes. They're also about survival, condition, context, and story. If enough of these coins were lost, consumed back into circulation without preservation, then the few that remain untouched become more significant than the original mintage might suggest. Mint marks are another layer of meaning. A coin without a mint mark from 1975 signifies a Philadelphia strike. Philadelphia was at the heart of American coinage history, the oldest mint, the center of early production, and a facility deeply intertwined with the nation's economic heartbeat. Coins struck that were meant for everyday life, flooding commerce with small denominations that kept the economy spinning. They were not intended to be rare. And yet, history has a habit of rewriting intention. Dirty dimes that survive decades in drawers or jars without human interference often look unattractive at first glance. They are dark, uneven, and worn. But that unattractiveness is the coin's authenticity. Every microscopic imperfection is evidence of decades of contact with hands, air, moisture, and other coins. Each of these interactions leaves a footprint that never quite disappears, even if it cannot be seen with the naked eye. Collecting old coins is not about aesthetic perfection. It is about integrity of story. A coin that was once bright and untarnished, but scrubbed clean loses its voice. It becomes a silent shell rather than a record of experience. The most fascinating coins are those that speak, that carry audible echoes of the past in their surfaces and in the microscopic details only visible under magnification. A 1975 Roosevelt dime that looks ordinary to most people can hold extraordinary meaning to someone who understands what time does to objects. Time is the most powerful force in numismatics because it is both destructive and preservative. It wears down surfaces, but also filters out the ordinary, leaving behind survivors, coins that stood the test of life unnoticed, only to be rediscovered by a later generation. Stories of coins becoming unexpectedly valuable often begin in places where people least expect them. Jars of old change, forgotten collections, pockets left in vintage jackets. These unremarkable moments next up. When you look at a 1982 Roosevelt dime, especially one struck at the Denver Mint, it doesn't scream wealth, rarity, or power. It whispers. And that whisper is exactly what makes it dangerous to underestimate. This coin was born in a time when America was changing quietly but deeply, when money itself was shifting from something people felt in their hands to something that would eventually disappear into screens and numbers. The 1982 dime lived in that in-between world, still physical, still touched, still counted, still trusted, and because of that, it absorbed the story of everyday America in a way modern money never can. The early 1980s were not glamorous years. Inflation had bruised the economy, jobs were uncertain, and people relied heavily on small change. Dimes mattered. A dime wasn't just 10 cents. It was coffee change, phone booth money, parking meter survival, and the final piece needed to make a purchase happen. Millions of 1982 dimes entered circulation with one purpose only, to be used hard and fast. No one was saving them. No one was protecting them. That neglect is the first ingredient of future mystery. The Denver Mint, marked by the small D on the coin, was producing coins at a relentless pace. Speed mattered more than perfection. Coins were struck, stacked, bagged, shipped, and released into the wild economy with little ceremony. In such conditions, subtle variations, weak strikes, metal flow issues, and surface anomalies naturally happened. Most were never noticed. Most were spent within days or weeks. A few, by pure chance, survived long enough to become something else entirely. Franklin D. Roosevelt's face on the dime had already become part of America's visual background by 1982. People didn't stop to admire it. They didn't question it. That familiarity made the coin invisible, and invisibility is the greatest camouflage history can give an object. What is unseen is rarely preserved, and what is rarely preserved becomes interesting decades later, not because it was special at birth, but because it survived without being chosen. Dirty conditioned dimes from this era often scare people away. Dark surfaces, dull gray tones, uneven color, and heavy would make them look worthless to the untrained eye. But in the world of serious collectors, natural aging is not damage. It is evidence. A naturally darkened surface tells a story of decades of exposure to air, moisture, skin oils, and circulation. It proves the coin was not altered, not polished, not stripped of its history. In many cases, that untouched originality is more respected than artificial shine. Coins like the 1982 D-dime lived real lives. They rode in pockets with keys, scraped against other coins, fell onto concrete floors, slid across counters, and rested in cash drawers that opened and closed thousands of times. Each interaction left microscopic marks, invisible individually, but powerful together. Those marks are not flaws, they are fingerprints of time. When collectors study such coins, they are not just looking at metal. They are reading a biography written in wear. The year 1982 also sits at a crossroads in American coinage. Production pressures, cost concerns, and material efficiency were shaping how coins were made. Small differences in strike strength, die condition, and planchet quality could create noticeable character in coins that were never meant to be examined closely. Most of these variations disappeared into circulation, but a small number escaped, not by design but by accident. What fuels shocking stories in the coin world is not fantasy. It is misunderstanding. People assume rarity must be obvious. They assume value must be loud. In reality, some of the most talked about coins begin as ordinary pieces that later reveal something unusual under magnification, context, or expert examination. A dime that looks common today can become fascinating tomorrow if it carries an unexpected characteristic that separates it from millions of its siblings. The myth of overnight fortune often comes from dramatic headlines, but the deeper truth is more interesting. Coins do not create wealth instantly. They reveal it slowly. They reward patience, study, and restraint. The greatest mistake people make is rushing, cleaning a coin, spending it, or selling it without understanding what they're holding. Once history is erased from a coin's surface, it can never be restored. A naturally worn 1982 D. Roosevelt dime that has never been cleaned is a time capsule. It holds a texture and era when money was personal, when people felt its weight and trusted its presence. That texture is irreplaceable. Once removed, the coin becomes just another object. Preserved, it becomes a witness. Collectors often say that coins choose their owners, not the other way around. A dime that survived decades in circulation, escaped melting, avoided cleaning, and remained intact until rediscovered today has already beaten impossible odds. That survival alone gives it narrative power. Narrative is what drives fascination, and fascination is what fuels value over time. When someone claims a coin can change a life, they are rarely talking about a single piece of metal. They are talking about knowledge, knowing when not to touch, not to clean, not to rush, and not to underestimate. Coins reward those who respect time, because time is what created their significance in the first place. The 1982 D. Roosevelt dime represents a forgotten chapter of American money, a chapter when coins were workhorses, not collectibles. That working life, recorded in wear and aging, is exactly what later generations find compelling. It reminds us that history is not only made by presidents and wars, but by small objects moving silently through millions of ordinary hands. If you ever find one of these dimes, especially in dark, original condition, do not judge it by shine. Hold it. Look at it closely. Understand that this coin has already lived longer than most objects around you. It has survived economic shifts, technological revolutions, and changes in how people even think about money. That survival gives it weight far beyond 10 cents. True fortune in coin collecting is not luck. It is restraint. The power of a coin lies not in what you do to it, but in what you allow it to remain. The 1982 D. Roosevelt dime is not loud, not flashy, not obvious. It is quiet, patient, and waiting, and history has a way of rewarding those who know when to listen instead of act. When people hear 1999 Roosevelt dime, almost nobody reacts. That silence is exactly why this coin deserves attention. The year 1999 was not just another date on a calendar. It was the edge of a century, the moment when America stood with one foot in the past and one foot in the future. Every coin struck that year carries that invisible tension. The 1999 D. Roosevelt dime was born at the Denver Mint during a time of massive production pressure, economic optimism, and technological transition, when speed mattered more than perfection, and coins were treated as tools, not treasures. By 1999, cash was still king. Credit cards existed, but daily life still depended on coins. Vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, toll booths, and payphones all relied on small change. Dimes moved fast. changing hands dozens of times in a single week. Nobody stopped to examine them. Nobody saved them intentionally. That neglect is a soil where future rarity quietly grows, not because the coin was meant to be special, but because it was never meant to survive. The Denver Mint was working like a factory under pressure. Millions of dimes were struck and released with relentless efficiency. Dies were used hard. Planchets moved quickly. Quality control focused on quantity, not individuality. In such an environment, subtle differences naturally appeared. Some strikes were stronger, some weaker. Some surfaces flowed differently under pressure. Some coins left a press with a character no one noticed because no one was looking closely enough. Franklin D. Roosevelt's portrait by 1999 had become invisible through familiarity. It had been on the dime for decades. People didn't see a president anymore. They saw just a dime. That familiarity stripped the coin of ceremony and, in doing so, protected it. Coins that are ignored are rarely altered. They aren't cleaned. They aren't polished. They aren't put into albums where hands and chemicals interfere. They live their lives untouched, and untouched originality is the most powerful trait a coin can carry into the future. Many 1999 D-dimes today appear dark, dull, or even dirty. To the untrained eye, that looks like damage. To a seasoned collector, it looks like honesty. Natural darkening does not come overnight. It forms slowly as metal reacts with air, moisture, and time. It tells you the coin has not been stripped of its surface. It tells you it has not been forced to shine for quick profit. It tells you the coin has been allowed to age naturally, and natural aging is one of the few things money cannot buy once it is gone. Stories about silver, rarity, and shocking value often swirl around modern coins because people sense that something important is hidden in plain sight. While most 1999 dimes were never meant to be precious metal, collectors know that value does not always come from composition alone. It comes from context, condition, originality, and survival. A coin does not need to be ancient to be meaningful. It needs a story that has not been interrupted. The year 1999 matters because it marks the psychological end of an era. After that year, money began to change its role in society. Digital transactions accelerated. Coins slowly lost importance. That shift gives late 1990s coinage a strange identity. These coins were used heavily, yet they represent the last generation of everyday money before physical currency started fading from daily life. That makes them historical witnesses, not just denominations. A 1999 D-dime that survived heavy circulation without being cleaned or altered is carrying something rare. Unbroken history. Every scratch, every smooth edge, every darkened tone was earned honestly. That honesty is what serious collectors search for, because once a coin is cleaned, its story is erased forever. A clean coin may look brighter, but it becomes silent. An original coin, even a dark one, still speaks. People love the idea of overnight fortune, but the real power of coins works differently. Coins don't explode in value suddenly. They rise quietly as understanding grows. What looks ordinary today becomes fascinating tomorrow when collectors realize how few untouched examples remain. Time does not increase the number of original coins. It only reduces them. Every year, more are lost, damaged, or altered. Survival itself becomes a filter. The 1999 D. Roosevelt dime sits in a dangerous position for careless owners. Because it looks common, people spend it without thinking. Because it looks dirty, people clean it without understanding. Because it feels modern, people assume it cannot matter. History proves that these assumptions age badly. Many of today's legendary coins were once dismissed as pocket change by people who thought exactly the same way. There is a reason experienced collectors warn against rushing. The fastest way to destroy potential is impatience. A coin should never be judged by shine alone. Shine can be manufactured in minutes. Originality takes decades. A naturally worn dime from 1999 that still carries its untouched surface is more honest than a bright coin that has been scrubbed into silence. Coins like this remind us that value is not always loud. Sometimes it hides in routine. Sometimes it survives because nobody cared enough to interfere. The 1999 D-dime traveled to a world that no longer exists, a world where coins mattered every day. That alone gives it historical gravity that cannot be recreated. If you ever come across one of these dimes, especially in dark, original condition, resist the urge to judge it quickly. Hold it, study it, respect it. Understand that its power does not come from what it promises today, but from what it has already survived. Time is the true mint mark that matters most. The greatest fortunes in coin collecting are not made by spending fast, selling fast, or cleaning fast. They're made by waiting. The 1999 D. Roosevelt dime is not a screaming treasure. It is a quiet one, and history has always rewarded those who know the difference.